"You don't belong up here, sir." 3 words, said like a verdict, landed across the lounge and everything in me went still. That's my hook, and yeah, that really happened. My name is Dr. Marcus Reed, and on a cold January night I walked into an airport lounge to read through inspection notes, only to walk out of a 30-minute showdown that would change an industry and a man's life forever. Act 1. The Hook. I'm sitting near the big glass windows of the Meridian Club papers, spread out coffee-cooling storm clouds pushing wind into the tarmac. I'm dressed down on purpose. Navy blazer, no badge, nothing flashy. I've learned that showing up without the title sometimes lets you see the honest thing. Then he arrives. Captain Richard Hale. 4 stripes, the kind of pilot who wears his years like armor. He stops at my table, looks right at me and says loud enough for the room to turn, "You don't belong in first class, sir," like he's reading from an instruction manual, like he's delivering a weather report. I look up slow, keep the papers flat and say, "Excuse me." He squares his shoulders, the posture of someone used to being obeyed, and repeats, "This section is for club members only. I need to see your credentials." He doesn't ask, he instructs. Around us, people go quiet. You could feel the air compressing like someone turned down the volume on the whole world. A woman at the next table, Tessa, a pediatric surgeon who flies more than most people breathe, clicks her phone closed, watching. Elena, the lounge manager, already flicked her screen and gives me the small, apologetic look that says she checked my status half an hour ago. Miguel, the young first officer next to Hale, glances at me with something like alarm and shame, and I think in that instant, this is going to be ugly. Hale leans in, voice low and sharp. "Sir, I'll need to see your membership card. This lounge has standards." He says standards like it's a public service, but you know what that word sometimes carries. I reach into my jacket, slide a metal card across the marble. Not to prove anything to him, but because it's heavy and true, and I'm tired of being asked to justify my right to sit. He barely looks, then waves it off. "Cards can be faked. I need ID." He looks at Elena like she's incompetent. She replies, "I verified his entry, Captain. The card triggered a VIP alert 20 minutes ago." But he is not done. "People like you." He starts that phrase, hitting the room like a dropped plate. Act 2. The Rise and Turning Point. I keep my voice low because anger won't help anyone, and because I do this work, I inspect, I enforce. I write reports, I know how to move through bureaucracy. I say, "There's no problem here. I'm preparing for a maintenance inspection in Miami tomorrow." He laughs hard and brittle. "If you're on my flight and you cause a disruption, you'll be watching it leave without you." Threats wrapped as protocol. Everything in me remembers other nights, other rooms, other times where someone assumed the story of me before they heard the facts. But tonight, something shifts. Not because of me, but because other people refuse to be bystanders. Tessa stands up, surgeon calm and surgical in tone. "Sir, you are out of line." And Miguel, the kid who could have stayed quiet to protect his career, leans forward and says, "Captain, he hasn't disturbed anyone." There's a crack in the captain's armor. He tries deflection. "Now you're making this about race." He uses race like a smokescreen, but you can see it, he's cornered and reaching. Haley escalates, calls for security, says he's reporting a disruptive passenger. Elena hesitates. She knows false reports can ruin careers and lives, but Hale is a captain, and procedure is supposed to back their calls. He leans over my papers like the predator he thinks he is and says, "What's in the bags or documents or something you'd rather not have security inspect?" Say it aloud, and you feel the malice. Miguel's face goes pale. This man's career could hinge on whether the first officer keeps his mouth shut. And then the modern world intervenes. A lady pulls out her phone and starts recording. Tessa keeps filming a businessman in the corner, starts a live stream without even thinking how viral this will go. And in the middle of that, an impossible detail drops like a hammer. When the security officers arrive and start asking for IDs, I hand over a federal credential. Not as a weapon, just as proof of who I am. The officer scans, taps his tablet, and the words flash back Marcus Reed, Director, National Aviation Safety Board. You could see it move through the room like a ripple. Hale's face. It's a study confusion, then anger, then a very human sort of panic. There's an odd, awful moment where you watch a man's lifelong construct of authority start to unravel. He's been unquestioned for 22 years, and suddenly the world is asking him to justify himself. I could have called enforcement right then, probably done it with a flick of a pen, but power used to hurt people is still power, and I didn't want vengeance. I wanted accountability. So I sat back and let the cameras and the witnesses do what rules sometimes cannot. Miguel comes forward again. His testimony matters because he's inside that cockpit hierarchy. He says what he saw. Elena corroborates. Tessa hands over a 43-minute recording. Every word he'd used, every shove of his authority was now material. Act 3. The Outcome and Aftermath. Once the federal agents and airport security connect the dots, once the badge, the videos, and the witnesses line up, the machinery of accountability begins to hum. Hale's ATP certificate, his pilot license, gets suspended pending investigation. The airline's ops center lights up. Social media has already done half the work. Tags and shares and outraged threads turn a lounge confrontation into a story the whole industry watches. For Hale, this is career death by 30 minutes of prejudice. For the airline, it's a corporate nightmare and a wake-up call. But the story's not just punishment. It becomes a pivot. The board asks for policy reviews. The airline fast-tracks mandatory bias and de-escalation training. Miguel, who had every reason to stay silent, is promoted not because he's famous, but because the company needs leaders who will do the right thing when it costs them. Elena moves into a training role, rebuilding guest services protocols so staff aren't forced to choose between truth and a paycheck. Tessa's video becomes a training module shown across the industry. The lounge that night never forgot the hum of people choosing to speak truth instead of letting power dictate the narrative. A year later, I saw Captain Hale again, not as a captain but as a man who'd been forced to confront what he'd been. He'd done counseling community service classes he'd mocked before. There was humbleness now, not grand apologies on camera, just two men standing in an airport, the kind of quiet conversation that doesn't rewrite the past, but acknowledges it. He asked awkward and sincere if there might be a pathway back someday. I told him that accountability isn't about destroying a person for mistakes, but about ensuring those mistakes aren't repeated. There's a difference between justice and revenge. I believe in both consequence and possibility. And here's the uncomfortable bit. Not everyone cheered for the fallout. There were people who said the punishment was too severe, that his life shouldn't be ruined by a single incident. There were others who wanted harsher penalties. That debate is the whole point. Because it's messy, because accountability sits in a public square where different values clash. But what I hold firm to is this dignity should not be discretionary, and no job title should be proof of moral high ground. So what does this mean for you watching at home? It means your decision to document, to speak, to intervene. Those tiny actions ripple. It means that systems can change when ordinary people refuse to accept prejudice as a protocol. It also means consequences can be real and painful, and sometimes they must be so others learn. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen someone judged before they spoke? Did you step in, or did you stay quiet? If you were, Miguel, would you risk your career to say the truth? Was the outcome here fair or too harsh? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell your story. Argue with me if you must. I want the heat, the nuance, the disagreement, because that's how conversations lead to change. If this moved you, hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs to know what courage looks like in an ordinary place, and tell me, what would you have done in that lounge?